The Cardinals left the MLB winter meetings in Dallas without making much noise, but Lady Luck did smile down upon the Redbirds when it came to the MLB Draft lottery. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you in the evening hours of Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. The Rule 5 draft came and went on Wednesday without the Cardinals getting involved in the major league portion. They didn't make any selections this year, following a nice pick last year with Ryan Fernandez, the right-handed reliever that the Cardinals took from Boston. He ends up being a fixture on last year's club, and hey, now the Cardinals have him for the future, but they didn't see enough benefit in dipping back into that well this year. They end up not selecting anybody in the major league portion. There were several moves made in the minor league portion of the Rule 5 draft. Not going to cover any of that in today's episode. If people really want me to dive in on it, I can dig in a little bit in a future episode perhaps, but we'll kind of just stick to the main topics of conversation today, including one player that was selected from the Cardinals in the Rule 5 draft by a division rival, by the way. So we'll talk about that tidbit as well as the main topic for today's episode, the MLB Draft lottery on Tuesday. The Cardinals, through no skill of their own, it's just complete luck, they knocked it out of the park, securing the 5th overall draft pick in the upcoming MLB Draft for 2025, which is going to be 2 spots higher than the Cardinals picked last year, even though they had a 71-91 record prior to the 2024 MLB Draft. They fell in that year's draft lottery, so poor luck, if you will. And this year, they absolutely exceeded their expectations for the draft and the lottery process that unfolded. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll also hear a funny quote from John Mozeliak, who was on MLB Network throughout the winter meetings. We know MLB Network has as many of the executives and coaches and managers and such on their shows as possible, on their panel there at the main drag wherever the event is going on. And Mo does have a pretty good sense of humor, and there was a funny little quip, a parting quip that he had that we'll share and play for you guys on today's episode of b-schaeff Daily if you happen to have missed it on MLB Network earlier this week. But before we get into the topic of the show today, I want to remind everybody that this episode of b-schaeff Daily is presented by Revival LLC and Smith Agri-Service. We'll talk to you about Revival LLC for just a moment. They specialize in passionately restoring log cabins to their former glory by studying traditional woodworking practices of the past and utilizing them in our modern world to create genuine, timeless beauty. Their focus is preserving these cherished values in existing structures, whether it be your log cabin or historic home, and elevating them to a higher standard. If you value craftsmanship, give Craft Revival LLC a call today at 573-366-6563. They specialize in log cabin repairs, maintenance, porch remodeling, historic millwork, and now offer new timber-framed construction, keeping craftsmanship alive one project at a time since 2021, Craft Revival LLC. So the Cardinals came into Tuesday's MLB Draft lottery with the 13th best odds on the board to potentially land the number 1 overall draft pick. I think it was 0.82% was their statistical chance to get the number 1 pick. And therefore, as it goes on the way down the board, you're less and less likely to move up into any capacity, but being able to vault up into the top 5, as the Cardinals did, was certainly, I mean, I call it an accomplishment, but it is obviously nothing that was skill-based. It just was the luck of the draw. I think it is like lottery balls, and I think that would equate to the number being like they had 41 out of 5,000 would have been the way that played out. So anyway, they do this in a secured location or a locked room, and every team is permitted, to have an executive or a representative, basically, that goes in there. And the Cardinals, I think it was maybe Randy Flores that did it last year, if I'm remembering this correctly, when the winter meetings were in Nashville, and the Cardinals had the 5th worst record in baseball, so they had the 5th best odds last year to potentially land the number 1 pick. And they ended up with the number 7 overall pick because there were 2 teams that had much lower odds that vaulted into the top 5, pushing the Cardinals down a couple of spots. This year, the Cardinals reversed that luck, and they're the ones doing the pushing and exceeding their expectation according to the odds. going from 13th to number 5, which will be back-to-back top 10 picks for, I believe, the first time in franchise history, and it'll be their highest pick since 1998 when they selected J.D. Drew 5th overall in that MLB draft. So pretty big doings, honestly. It was the biggest news to come out of these winter meetings for the Cardinals because they don't end up doing anything in terms of a big trade. The Arenado stuff is still out there lingering, but this was probably the most substantial thing that happens for the Cardinals. They are now in position to land another marquee player when it comes to next year's MLB Draft 2025, this coming summer, after landing J.J. Weatherholt at number 7, which, again, we were sort of looking at that number 7 and saying, yeah, the Cardinals probably disappointing last year relative to where they finished in a bottom 5 capacity in the standings to only end up with the 7th pick. That was a less fortunate result in terms of where they landed in the draft, but they got the player arguably that they might have wanted anywhere within the top 5 because of the pedigree of J.J. Weatherholt. So Cardinals end up with their current top prospect in the system, according to most people's rankings, from that number 7 pick, and now they're going to have the number 5 this coming season in the draft when they had a better record. They won 12 additional games, going 83-79 instead of 71-91, and yet they move up 8 spots. The lottery is a great thing. It is kind of interesting, too, that a lot of folks down the stretch of the season were really hoping to see maybe the Cardinals lose some more games so that they could move up in terms of the draft positioning once it became clear that they weren't very likely or likely at all, in play at all, to make the postseason. And you could even perhaps go back even further than that and talk about at the trade deadline, people hoping to see the Cardinals sell off some additional pieces, thereby making the team worse and moving up their draft position in theory. But the Cardinals end up with the 5th pick. I don't think they possibly could have imagined doing any better than that, even if they had sold at the trade deadline in a substantial way. So pretty cool for the Cardinals to kind of have that feather in their cap, that trump card in their back pocket, that when we get excited about college baseball prospects and obviously high school guys, there's another Holiday entering the draft this year. He'll go to the Nationals. Ethan Holiday is going to end up being the number 1 pick, you have to imagine. And the Nationals had Matt Adams actually as their on-stage representative when they were announcing the draft order after the lottery in Dallas this week. And another aspect of this that's pretty funny, I was mentioning the locked room where they do the initial lottery because they don't actually pull the lottery balls or whatever it is that they do. They don't do that on stage. They do that behind the scenes, and then they have a very, formal announcement that's sort of the ceremony for television. The Cardinals didn't even bother having a representative in the room this year where the actual drawing was done, because I guess their odds were so remote that they didn't even really figure it was worth their time. John Mozeliak was asked about it. I saw a Jeff Jones tweet where Mo basically said, well, if we end up with the number 1 pick, we'll find out on TV when they announce it, just like everybody else, which he didn't say on TV, because there is a big ballroom basically, or a conference room at the hotel where they do the meetings every year, where they have the stage and they show it. I was in the room last year when it was Brad Paisley, I think, in Nashville that was doing the announcing. For whatever reason, I think it was Colton Cowser, outfielder for the Orioles this year, that was like the MC for whatever reason that is. But they're in the room, and so that was the point at which the Cardinals found out as they're announcing it on stage. They're not watching it on TV, is all I'm trying to explain, that they were the number 5 pick, and it didn't change anything, right? Like the fact that they didn't have a rep in the room. If anything, sports players anyway are superstitious. I wonder now if front office members are superstitious. Obviously, by next year, it'll be Chaim Bloom's team, not John Mozeliak as the head baseball executive of the organization. But because it worked out so well for them this year, I wonder if they maybe take the same approach in a future year. Hopefully, the Cardinals aren't in the draft lottery next year. Hopefully, they're in the playoffs and thereby not involved in this. And actually, I think because of revenue sharing, they're not going to be eligible, whatever. I don't know the specifics of it. I'd have to find the terminology on why this is, but I think I read that the Cardinals won't be allowed or eligible to pick inside the top 9 next year, regardless of record, which is, if that's the case, kind of a bummer, because this is a team that, again, is not going all in on trying to win in 2025. So you'd like to potentially have the chance to have another great draft pick, but they're getting it this year. So it all levels out. Top 5 pick, number 5, and you look at the way that it's going to play out. I was mentioning going into the college baseball season, it's going to be once again a very interesting time for Cardinals fans because you're going to be tracking a lot of these names that are considered some of the top prospects at the various levels of not only college baseball, but a lot of the prep kids will be getting a lot of attention as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm checking out MLB Pipeline has already its first full 2025 mock draft. They have the Cardinals taking an outfielder out of Arizona, Brenden Summerhill. Good first name. Doesn't spell it properly, but that's okay. And the blurb on him is that Summerhill sports one of the sweetest left-handed strokes in this draft and could develop into a center fielder with 5 solid or better tools, rated as the number 10 prospect in the draft, according to MLB Pipeline, but they have the Cardinals taking him at number 5, a 21-year-old who's listed at 6'3", 205 pounds, right-handed thrower, left-handed batter in the outfield, scouting grades of 55 on the hit tool, 50 on the power, 55 on the run, 55 on the arm, 55 on the field, and 55 overall. University of Arizona. So they've got Mizzou's old athletic director now at Arizona, Desiree Reed-Francois. Anyway, going to be exciting. Going to be cool to see where the Cardinals end up deciding to go with that pick, whether there are any elite pitchers that emerge. Looks like Tyler Bremner and Jamie Arnold are 2 that are listed, going 3 and 4 to the Mariners and Rockies, respectively. So as of right now, maybe those are a couple of the top pitching names. I'm going to be honest with you. I am not at a point where on December 11th, I'm going to tell you and rattle off who the top arms in college baseball are going to be this year. That's not really my jurisdiction. I definitely, pick up and follow it more closely as the season arrives, but that's not something that I have any semblance of a clue on right now. So I'm just kind of reading off what MLB Pipeline has to say. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting because the Cardinals are in a position once again to be able to benefit from having their pick of the litter, essentially. And last year, you have a guy like J.J. Weatherholt who had an injury, and if not for that injury, might have gone even higher in the draft and was considered to be one of the most talented players in the draft and the type of guy that, some people could have seen gone number 1. He goes number 7 to the Cardinals because of the various, whether it's signability or injury concerns, whatever the case might have been there. He ends up at number 7, and the Cardinals say, yep, we'll take him. So when you're in that top 5, you have a potential chance to realistically land one of, if not in some cases, the very best prospect in a given draft when you're that close to the top. So the Cardinals are in a really good spot. And again, it's all because of the luck of the draw when it came to that MLB draft lottery. So Cardinals fans, let me know your thoughts on the Cardinals landing the number 5 pick. If you have already someone that you hope the Cardinals take with that pick, let me know. Could be kind of fun to get into the weeds again, as we'll be obviously covering and talking about all the draft lead-up stuff more than we might do in other years because the Cardinals are going to be right in the thick of it once again. I want to spend a little time, though, talking about the player that was scooped up by a division rival, sniped away from the Cardinals in the Major League portion of the Rule 5 draft on Wednesday. That's kind of the final main event that goes on at the MLB winter meetings every year. So we'll talk about that right after I tell you about Smith Agri-Service, a family-owned independent retailer providing farmers in Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa with competitive pricing on Corteva, BASF, generic brand crop protection products, and Brevant corn and soybean seed. Scan the QR code on the YouTube screen in front of you or text 202-988-1106, or you can email smithag@irtc.net to get in touch with Smith Agri-Service, one of our presenting partners here on B-Schaeff Daily. So the name that is no longer a Cardinal because he was scooped up by the Milwaukee Brewers is left-handed pitcher Connor Thomas, who at one point in time seemed like he would be destined for a big league future with the Cardinals. Can remember back to after the 2022 season, he spent some time in the Arizona Fall League, which is obviously a prospects league. And if you're over there, you're there for a reason, whether it's because you're among the best prospects and your team wants you to get some more work in against elite competition, or maybe in the case of Connor Thomas, I can recall he was working on some specific things to try to get himself ironed out. He had a 1.75 ERA in 6 starts there in the Fall League, fall of 2022. But then it just never really did materialize for him the following season. 2023 had a 5.53 ERA in AAA Memphis. This past season, though, converted mostly to a relief role and actually ended up pitching pretty well, 2.89 ERA in 90 innings, only 79 strikeouts in those 90 innings. So when you don't have the dynamic arm, a lot of times maybe you don't get protected, and that's sort of, I guess, the way that the Cardinals decided to go with it. I think he was on the 40-man roster at one time or another, but was outrighted off or optioned off, wavered off at one point, and ultimately spent this last season in Memphis without that protection. And then when it comes time again to basically say, hey, if you want to expose a guy like Connor Thomas to the Rule 5 draft, that is what can happen. I think they did it after 2023, and it was really no big deal because at the time he wasn't performing well and other teams weren't necessarily interested in him. He's 26 years old, so, I mean, he's been around the block for a number of years. Looking here, November 16th, he was outrighted to Memphis, and that was November 16th, 2023. So had been on the 40-man roster. I remembered that correctly. But then this past season, pitched better, didn't end up on the active roster, on the 40-man roster at any point. And the Milwaukee Brewers land him in the Rule 5 draft today, which means he'll be on their big league roster next year. The Cardinals will conceivably see Connor Thomas in the big leagues against them as a division rival. And again, it's just kind of a bummer because you have a guy who the Cardinals thought enough of him to send him to the fall league. He performed really well in that fall league season. And then the following year, I remember being in January of 2023, being at Busch Stadium for winter warm-up and hearing a lot about Connor Thomas, and the Cardinals were excited about him, and he just never really put it together that following season. Converts to a relief role, which is something that, you know, in conjunction with the organization, I'm sure was a decision that was made, and ends up doing very well. But it's almost like if you're not blowing guys away with strikeouts and those K numbers, you don't maybe get a bunch of attention. I wonder if the Cardinals had an inkling that this could happen for a 26-year-old reliever who 2.89 ERA in the minors in the past season that he was in. Like, that, it's kind of interesting that the Cardinals would leave him exposed if they thought he could be part of their future MLB bullpen. So maybe they didn't, or maybe they just thought, again, not a high K rate, and so maybe not going to get a lot of attention. But man, the fact that it's the Brewers that claim him, does that give you a little bit of pause as a Cardinals fan? It probably should, because the Brewers have just been so good and on top of all of the ways in which you can develop relief pitching and keep throwing arms at you, guys you never heard of, that next time you look up in August, they've got a 1.8 ERA in 52 games. And you go, what the heck? Where'd this guy come from? It seems kind of like that's the deal when it comes to the Brewers. Now, checking here, he was, 2019 was his first year in the big leagues, or pardon me, as a professional. So he's long since been eligible for Rule 5. I don't know off the top of my head if 2020 counted against these kids, but I think it did in terms of years in the minors. But even if it didn't, 19, 21, 22, 23 would have been already the fifth year. So, yeah, he was eligible prior to this year when the Cardinals outrighted him in November of 23. I have to imagine that would have made him eligible, although any team could have had him if they were to claim him on waivers at that point in time. So, again, not surprising that he wasn't picked up in a waiver claim or Rule 5 last year. Had a good season in 24. The Brewers said, yep, we know what to do exactly with that, and you'll be probably in the Milwaukee bullpen shoving against the Cardinals one way or another in 2025. Does it bother you, the Connor Thomas thing? I think the one thing I would say, the Cardinals currently have 38, I believe, of their 40-man roster slots filled. What would the harm have been if it was even borderline to just go ahead and throw him on and send him to spring training with the chance to try out in the bullpen? Maybe it's the handedness. The Cardinals are looking at the situation going, all right, already on our 40-man roster, we've got honestly more lefties than we need. That could have been the way that the Cardinals viewed it. Can never really have too much pitching. We know that. But from the left side, the Cardinals might have said, all right, we got John King, we got Liberatore, we got Steven Matz still floating around. Is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be a reliever? What's that going to look like? Jojo Romero, obviously, still on the team. Zach Thompson. So, you do have a number of guys when it comes to relief potential players, and maybe they just said, we're covered on the lefty front, and we're just not going to add him. I don't know. It's interesting. 2.89 ERA, no matter the level, is nothing to sneeze at. And when it's a guy that had previously been really highly considered by the organization for being somebody that went to the fall league and was talked about as someone who could be maybe just a call away, a phone call away from the big leagues, never does end up getting that opportunity with the Cardinals. And now he's looks like going to get it with Milwaukee. So good for Connor Thomas. I mean, that's one of the takeaways for folks who follow the Cardinals minor league system. Is a good kid, good dude, and going to be nice to see him finally get that opportunity. He probably was thinking at times last year, man, I'm finally kind of hitting my stride and not getting that call, not getting that opportunity for a team that's out of the race. And now they didn't find a 40-man roster spot for him, and the Brewers did. So I think that's the optics of it that'll bother people the most, is that it's the Brewers specifically doing it because of what their track record has been in recent years for developing pitching talent, especially relief pitching talent. And if they see something in him, why didn't the Cardinals? Like, that's going to be, I think, a natural question. But I also think it can be a little bit dangerous to micromanage and look into each and every one of the situations and kind of pick apart which ones went wrong for the Cardinals, whereas there are probably plenty of guys the Cardinals cast aside that don't end up making it. We'll see if Connor Thomas ends up being one that does. And again, because it's the Brewers, I think our natural inclination is to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, if Milwaukee is targeting him, they're probably doing it for a reason, so it'll probably work out. I think Connor Thomas will probably be a fine pitcher for him in the bullpen. Is he going to be like a star? Not necessarily, but again, if you look at the numbers for various Brewer relievers in recent years, there were probably plenty of guys that I would not have pegged for stardom that ended up having 2 ERAs for a full season, and you're just looking up and going, how in the world did this happen? But that's the Milwaukee Brewers, man. They do a very nice job of that. For the Cardinals kind of picking and adding to their organizational coaching staff and their front office staff, grabbing Cerfolio from the Guardians, grabbing pitching coaches from the Mariners and different places, organizations that absolutely do development the right way. You'd like to think they could poach somebody from Milwaukee, because I know, like, inside the division, maybe that's a little bit more difficult to do. You might have to offer a pretty substantial pay bump, and even if you did, people might have some sour feelings about it on the other end of that. You don't want to burn bridges, whatever the case might be. But yeah, maybe you poach from Milwaukee, because they've certainly done a nice job in recent years. But nevertheless, Connor Thomas, he'll be a Brewer, and good for him, is honestly my main takeaway. It's just a little interesting because you look at it and go, yeah, the Cardinals are basically going to be throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks when they get to spring training as it pertains to several of the spots in that bullpen. And maybe that would have been another guy, despite the fact that you might already have as many lefties as you need. That might have been a guy that could have had some MLB future in him, and now we'll see with Milwaukee whether he does. Okay. Before we get out of here, I would like to play an audio clip for you, courtesy of MLB Network, of John Mozeliak, where he joined their show. I don't even know what the name of the show would have been, but they had the whole panel there at the winter meetings in Dallas. It's always in an ornate kind of hotel lobby, and it's always in December, so there's always Christmas decorations everywhere that you look. The Opryland, the Gaylord Opryland Resort, I think it's called, in Nashville last year where it was held. This place was like a maze. I've never seen such a big building that I've been inside, with all the different lobbies and decorations and everything. It was pretty cool. And so that looks to be the vibe from this year in Dallas as well. And I want to play this quote because the last question they asked Mozeliak after he talked, and check it out, MLB.com has a video of it in John Denton's most recent story about the draft lottery. Might be worth checking out if you want to scroll down and see it. But their last question, they said, was basically, hey, we're having Ollie Marmol on to sort of bookend our coverage today. He's going to be the last person we talk to before the show's over today. What question should we ask him? That's what you're about to hear. And this is just an example of Mo's sense of humor. I know a lot of Cardinals fans maybe kind of view Mo and you see Mozeliak and you're like, oh, I have this picture of how he is in my mind. But he is kind of a funny dude, and this is an example of it. I'll play for you here.
We have Ollie Marmol to end our 2-hour stint of MLB Tonight. He's going to end it. So we're like bookending Cardinal faces, okay? Give me a question I should ask Ollie Marmol.
Ask him who will be our fifth starter.
I will.
Isn't he supposed to ask you that question?
Well, see, I'm not sure yet either. Very fluid, boys. Very fluid.
Hey, congratulations on a
yes.
That was funny. All right, I don't care what you say. That was funny, and even having the quick hitter response, because the guy said, "Hey, isn't he supposed to ask you that question? You're the lead executive. He said, hey, I don't know either. I mean, there is a sort of candor to the whole thing where the Cardinals are in some unfamiliar terrain right now, operating with a budget that's going to be lesser on the Major League payroll, and he's trying to figure out this Arenado thing, and it's clear that he's going to be moved. He will be traded. Be shocked if Arenado's on the team come February. But John Mozeliak is just kind of doing his thing. He said, I don't know, ask Ollie who the fifth starter is going to be, because obviously Ollie is hopefully I didn't see or hear what the interview with Ollie ended up being, but I hope that went off without a hitch, and later Ollie finds out that Mo was behind that question. That could be kind of some good fun. But in the case of the fifth starter, there are a lot of directions that it could go. It could be internal, and probably will be, but you might also have to decide, like, are they going to try to trade Steven Matz? That's been something that has been rumored. Are they going to look to, what do they do with Michaelis? Or are you committing to Pallante and McGreevy both in the rotation, or is it just going to be, Pallante's in, but maybe the answer is McGreevy if they trade somebody, or if there's an injury? Or is Eric Fetty on the trade block? A lot of Cardinals fans I see on social media think it should be a no-brainer to trade Fetty. I've said it would surprise me simply because the Cardinals acquired him for a reason, and the reason was 2025, and nothing has really changed since then, other than the fact that, we know they're spending less money in the payroll next year, but that was probably something they had anticipated, I would think, based on the revenues and everything like that, prior to when they told the world about it at the end of September, beginning of October. So I don't know that Fetty's getting moved, but you could kind of see the gears turning for Mo when he was asked that question, and he said, ask him who's going to be and then he said fifth starter, but he could have said third baseman, but then he said, maybe I don't want to be so controversial and poke fun a little bit at the idea that, we're trading a marquee franchise player. Don't want to dig at the fans like that, because there will be some fans who find it funny if he had said who's going to be our third baseman. There would be some other fans who would look at it and say, oh, that's, in poor form, because you're kind of mocking the fact that you're not necessarily trying to win this year. So I feel like he was kind of running through the roster and the depth chart a little bit, going, what would be the inoffensive but still funny quip that I could make here? And he said fifth starter. I thought that was kind of fun. You could see who's going to be our closer. It's like, oh, wait, they're breaking news. They are going to trade Helsley, which I don't know that they are, but that's just sort of where my mind went. But let me know what you thought about that, Cardinals fans, and what you thought in general of the activity, or maybe it was inactivity, of the Cardinals during the MLB winter meetings this week. But hey, that number 5 pick is going to be looking pretty good at some point in time. And man, once they have that draft, as long as they don't do something silly with the pick, you're going to see a Weatherholt and Quinn Matthews and Tink Henson, then whoever that kid ends up being. The top 5 is going to look pretty robust for the Cardinals before too long when it comes to the organizational top prospects. But thank you guys so much for listening to the coverage this week. It's not going to stop here. We'll continue to follow the rumors and reports and rumblings pertaining to the Cardinals. And of course, when Nolan Arenado gets traded, we will have a podcast. We'll probably jump right on for a live stream if it's possible to do it, at least within like a day or so of that happening. So make sure you guys are locked in here on YouTube. Make sure you're checking out B-Schaeff Daily on Spotify if you'd rather just listen audio only, without having to deal with the YouTube window on your phone or on your computer. However you like to listen is good with me. Just thank you guys so much for the support. You can still sign up for channel memberships if you'd like to support the channel in that way. That's always down below with a link in the video description. As well as, hey, if you are somebody out there that feels like Smith Agri-Service would be a company that you should support because you're in the farming industry, check that out. That's Smith Agri-Service. Just check out the QR code there on the screen, or get in touch with Joshua with Craft Revival LLC. If you've got a log cabin or a historic home that you think needs some TLC, Joshua does a great job, and you can check out all of his work if you want a visual representation of what Craft Revival LLC is all about by heading to their Facebook or their Instagram page. And I've got those links, at least the Instagram link, below as well. So check those things out. Support the sponsors, support the partners of the show. Appreciate you guys so very much, and we'll continue to cover Cardinals baseball all the way through the offseason. Spring training is just around the corner. Thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.